Well, in this week's Farmers Weekly, our trade commentator, Nigel Sterling, reported that New Zealand's questioning whether Donald Trump's payments of billions of dollars to American farmers go beyond the limits allowed under our international trade rules under the WTO. The Trump administration forked out $12 billion US in subsidies in 2018 to buffer American farmers from the fallout of the president's trade war in China. And that went on to continue greatly, as I'm reading here, that this year, according to one US report, will make federal government's contributions will make 36% of American farm incomes this year, the highest since 2001, my apologies. At a recent meeting of the World Trade Organization's Committee of Agriculture in late September, officials from New Zealand asked US counterparts and when that they can expect formal notification of these payments and, of course, whether this is fair. The Dairy Companies Association of New Zealand's Executive Director Kimberly Crewther joins us now on the phone to discuss this unfair playing field. Kimberly, has this been mounting for quite some time and accelerated because of COVID?
Subsidies are a long-standing source of distortion in global dairy markets. For a while, there was a trend for countries to pull back on them. So the commitments made under the Uruguay round and the implementation of that. But in recent years, we have seen a tendency for rebuilding of those subsidy limits, as you've seen with the US package last year, and now with COVID is prompting some countries to put more, look to more support measures for their own farmers. And that's all well and good, but our concern is where these support measures actually distort the market and come at a heavy cost to unsubsidised producers elsewhere.
And it is sending an interesting signal to foreign farmers around the world that it's they can keep on producing regardless of the prices. I mean, how long can this sustain?
Well, that's exactly what subsidies do. When you're receiving 36% of your income, which is in the case of the US farmers, or European farmers dairy farmers receive about 42% of their income from the cap, it means that they are less attuned to market price signals. And what can happen then is that you have situations of overproduction and building up of stocks. We most recently saw that in the EU when they built record levels of intervention stocks, and studies have indicated that probably cost the price suppression that occurred as a result of that could have cost New Zealand farmers around 28 cents per kg of milk solids. So that's $500 million cost to the New Zealand dairy industry as a whole.
So what happens when America step up to this committee of the World Trade Organization for Agriculture and say, well, hang on a minute, it's not specifically subsidies, this was pandemic driven and we had to do something. What sort of leg do they have to stand on, do you believe?
Well, it's really the purpose of the Agriculture Committee is to be able to ask questions and understand what other countries are doing and the likely impacts of their subsidies. One of the important things is if they have taken measures in response to COVID, then those measures need to be temporary. So there's a discussion there to be had for not just the US but a range of other countries as well as to how they plan to transition away from these measures. And there's a real danger that you can put subsidies in place on an intended temporary basis and then they don't disappear. We need to remember that the Common Agriculture Policy in Europe that's had its 75th anniversary now was set up as a temporary measure after some global events occurred.
And we are specifically talking about the distortion from the US industry, but I'm reading here in Nigel Sterling's article in this week's Farmers Weekly that in May, the America's National Milk Producers Federation slammed the EU for restarting government incentivized stockpiling, and they also won a WTO case against China for exceeding its limits on subsidies to cropping farmers. And you're quoted saying you do wonder sometimes whether these people own mirrors.
Well, I think it's the important point there is that trade is a two-way street, as we feel the impacts of other countries' distortions, so too do American farmers. But when we all have an interest in not having other countries distort, you need to exhibit good behaviour yourself.
And since you spoke to Nigel, things have confirmed a lot more in President-elect Biden, and coming out and saying that he wants to return to the WTO, amongst other things, as the Paris Climate Accord. So what's your thoughts, over the weekend and as things have been unfolding, of US's position on being a bit of a better global market player?
That would be really positive. The US has an important role to play in terms of the global rules-based trading system. For that to be strong and to move forward, US leadership is important. So if they are stepping back and are going to make a more active commitment to those frameworks, we'll be really pleased to see that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Executive Director of the Dairy Companies Associations of New Zealand, Kimberly Crewther, speaking to us there. And this is it's a great article, New Zealand Challenges US Farm Subsidies, in this week's Farmers Weekly. Of course, farmersweekly.co.nz.
This is Sarah's Country.